Hello and welcome to the Mysterious Men in Black. Since I started my channel, I've had quite a few people requesting I make a video on this topic. In fact, recently I was discussing one of my videos with a subscriber when again the topic was brought up. Honestly, I would have made this video sooner, but I mistakenly thought I had already done so previously. I really need to sit down and write out a list of all the topics I've covered already. Anyway, the Men in Black have gained a bit of popularity with movies surrounding them, but unlike their cinema counterparts, their visits are not comical or fun at all. So with this video, I want to investigate some sightings along with trying to ascertain who or what they are. One thing that has always been synonymous with appearances from the Men in Black are their ties with UFO sightings or anyone who investigates the topic with any bit of accuracy. As with most encounters, appearances have changed as time has gone on, but for the most part, there are quite a few consistencies. Commonly, these men are normally seen at least pairs, but on rare occasions are encountered singly. They are described as being fairly tall, and as the name implies, always wear black suits, which is occasionally including a black hat. This much hasn't changed in later descriptions, however their facial features have. Originally there wasn't anything abnormal about their face other than remaining completely emotionless and having a sinister air about them. As time and sightings grew, these men became more in the lines of horror films. Most are described as being bald, no eyebrows, strange bone structures, and extremely red-lipped. As you will see in later reports, some seem to possess a form of superhuman power. Even though descriptions can vary, what is quite apparent, if they exist, is that they are either operating under a shadow organization or in some theories aren't even from this planet. Frequently the idea of Men in Black is thought to be a recent occurrence, but the first reported sighting was about 70 years ago. On June 21st, 1947, near Maury Island in the Puget Sound off of Washington State, a man by the name of Harold Dahl was out fishing when he encountered something unexpected. According to his story, he saw 4 to 6 donut-shaped objects flying towards him when one of the craft struck another beside it. This caused the struck craft to spew out a liquid that he described as looking like lava or white metal. This chemical was said to have hit Harold's boat, killing his dog and burning the arm of his son. Later, Mr. Dahl reported that he was visited by a man in a dark suit who threatened him and told him not to talk about what he saw. Harold went so far as saying he had taken photos and debris from his ship, and when the Man in Black visited, he took all the evidence and made his photos hazy. At a later date, the military did an investigation as well into the sighting with interesting results. This story wouldn't be complete without the inclusion that a few weeks after the visit, it was reported that Harold had claimed it was all a hoax. Many pieces of this puzzle fit that theory, but in researching this, I found that declassified documents from the FBI state that Mr. Dahl did not admit to a blacked out name that his story was a hoax, but only stated that if questioned by authorities, he was going to say it was all a hoax because he did not want any further trouble in the matter. Honestly, this sounds like someone who is afraid to talk about what he saw for some reason. Another report I saw states that Harold's family wrote it off as a hoax as well. The real interesting part is that the report that should be on your screen right now goes into depth about others seeing the same event, including a pilot. So much for the encounter just being something made up by a fisherman. Moving on to one of the most famous UFO cases in history, and that would be July 8th, 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. I won't be going into depth about the events on that day since a lot of people know the information out there. As a very brief recap, for posterity only, on that day many witnesses saw an unknown craft in the sky on fire that crashed in the nearby countryside. Originally it was reported to be a flying disc by a few reports, which also later involved alien bodies being recovered. It was later claimed to be a balloon, to which many years later the FBI released papers stating it was in fact a balloon. Many see this as an open and shut case, but many mysteries and unanswered questions remain. In keeping with the topic of this video, there were at least 12 or more people involved in the incident that were threatened in various forms. While most military personnel were simply told not to talk about what they saw, civilians were not treated as accommodating. In most all accounts, the person delivering the threat were unknown officials identifying as part of the military. Sheriff George Wilcox was visited after the incident and told if he ever talked about what he saw, not only would he be killed, but his entire family would be as well. Similar visits resounded through this time period, but one of the most damning was when the Lieutenant Governor of New Mexico, Joseph Montoya, was informed that talking about what he saw would be too dangerous and that the FBI would do away with him. It is at this point that many may think that these visits were not men in black, which for the most part could be true. However, what is too coincidental is how extreme the threats were, as well as its ties to the FBI. Both of those, the tone of the conversation and the FBI, are greatly tied with the men in black. It warrants being mentioned at least for comparison. Dr. Herbert Hawkins, a doctor and hypnotist, had been a consultant for a case of alien abduction in Maine. On September of 1976, he was home alone when he received a strange call from a man claiming to be from the New Jersey UFO Research Organization. The man wanted to talk to Dr. Hopkins in person about the case he was currently taking part in. Dr. Hopkins agreed, and as he was walking to the front door to turn his light on for his expected visitor, he saw a man already walking up his steps. The doctor was shocked that he didn't see a car, nor did he find it possible for the approaching man to make it from New Jersey to his house that quick. Remember, cell phones weren't commercially available until 1984. Herbert allowed the man into his house without asking him his name, but he did later mention that his dog barked once at the visitor, but then went and hid in the closet until he left. He described the man as being bald with no eyebrows, his skin was deathly pale, he had a small nose and ears, and it appeared he didn't fit his suit well. After the man talked to Herbert for a while, it was obvious he wasn't talking about the case, but was in fact asking how much Dr. Hopkins knew. At one point he mentioned that the doctor had 2 coins in his pocket, and asked him to produce one. Oddly, he was right, and Herbert pulled out a new penny. The man in black asked him to watch the coin, and before his eyes the penny turned a silver color, then blurred, and finally disappeared. The house guest then mentioned that the coin would never be seen in this plane of existence again. He then talked about the Barney and Betty Hill case before finally informing Dr. Hopkins that he should destroy everything he had on the alien abduction case he was working on. The man in black left his house, and not long after a bright flash of light was seen. Honestly, my first impression of this story is that the coin was being used as a metaphor for what would happen to the good doctor if he didn't follow the visitor's advice on destroying the UFO case files. As you can assume, this is just a brief overview of visits and sightings individuals have had with the men in black. In order to make a full comprehensive video of this, it would take a lot of time since just about every UFO encounter, UFO researcher, alien encounter, and even cryptid sightings normally get followed up by someone fitting the Men in Black's description. In fact, one of my more popular videos about the mysterious Indrid Cold leads many to believe he too was part of the Men in Black, albeit a nicer one than most. So at this point, I want to look at what these men possibly are. The more mundane but equally terrifying theory is that they are a group of men that work for a particular branch of government, but no one knows who controls them. They are able to work outside of the law in order to tie up loose ends when something needs covered up. Another theory follows closely with the previous one, but pertains more to their change in appearance. There are those who believe that they are militarized clones sent out for only one purpose, and that is to keep people quiet. This attributes to why so many descriptions mention that they all look relatively the same. The final idea is that they aren't human at all, but rather a race of aliens known as the Tall Whites. According to descriptions of the beings, they are arguably said to live on the moon, but are the most humanistic of all alien races. What makes it a little iffy is the fact that Tall Whites are frequently seen as the Watcher race, so it doesn't make sense as to why they would take to being so disruptive to human lives. What is interesting is that some feel these beings have a more ancient connection, since they have been talked about in many cultures throughout time. In the Middle East, people feared strangers who dressed in black robes and turbans that would lure people out into the desert. In China, Tibet, and India, the King of the World mythology deals with a superior race of beings that live underground that will occasionally send out what is called agents, all dressed in black, to meddle with human affairs. Again, these are all theories, and I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think they are. Before I go, I wanted to mention that in Project Blue Book, it was mentioned that the military was concerned over so many witnesses being visited by people claiming to be military personnel. Most of these visits threaten people into keeping quiet, so it sounds familiar. So do you think they're militarized mafia, aliens, or just the figment of people's imaginations? With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.